Hi everyone, I want to go ahead and try to finish going over the iPet Goat movie because, as I've stated before, I just want to do my part to try to help solve the mystery. And so I just want to give my take on what I'm understanding about the movie. And I'll go ahead and play it from the beginning and just talk about it as it plays. And this movie is basically about the apocalypse. It's about the mark of the beast, but more importantly, it's also about the rapture, which is why the length of the video, as I've mentioned before, is 7 minutes and 27 seconds. 727 is the Strong's number for rapture in the Greek, and it's the Strong's number for the word ark in the Hebrew, as in the Ark of the Covenant. And so this all started with 9/11. I believe that's when the awakening took place. That's why you see Eve waking up when it gets to that scene. You'll see that she wakes up, but it all begins with 9/11. I believe that's when the bride started to wake up to a lot of what was going on. And as I've stated before, I've gone over some of this imagery in previous videos. It's all very significant. And then so you see Obama now is fast forwarding to the present. He's graduated as far as Satan's puppets, and so Eve just begins to wake up. And like I said, it began with 9/11. You see the exit sign over here, so this is now the time of the Exodus, and the apple ends up over here, which is Strong's number 2777 and 2778. I believe represents the time frame that we're in right now. And so the Antichrist knows that his time is just about up. It's the beginning of the tribulation, the 3.5 years. And so it's going back to September 11, the Twin Towers burning down. And I'll speed it up a little bit. Okay, of course you have CERN doing their thing at the same time, trying to bring about their version of the end of the world, the splitting of the atom. They're trying to attempt what God is going to do. And then this is the beginning of all the wars over the oil. So you see the oil. And so I'm not going to go over all the details of all the imagery, but I just want to get to the important part, which, as I've mentioned before, I believe it represents the rapture, just like it did in the beginning. And then over here, this is showing Satan, this character. Okay, I have to slow it down because it started going too fast, and back it up a little bit. But of course, this is showing over here the destruction of Mystery Babylon. I believe that's what the Statue of Liberty represents. And so you see the torch falling off, so it's showing the destruction of Mystery Babylon. And then, so this is what I wanted to explain, that this character's name is Draco, and so he represents the dragon, he represents Satan, and this is just showing how he has a stronghold even from the time of birth, because this child grows up a little bit later. You see it becomes bigger, and Satan is constantly, well, it switches over here to Jesus. And this imagery right here is actually Anubis, and I'll show you what that is. Okay, it says over here, Anubis was the god of embalming and the dead. Since jackals were often seen in cemeteries, Egyptians believed that the Anubis watched over the dead. Anubis was the god who helped to embalm Osiris after he was killed by Seth. And so basically Anubis represents the afterlife or the resurrection. And so this god is basically the image of a dog. And so I'll just pull it up this way. It says, is the Greek name of a god associated with mummification and the afterlife. In ancient Egyptian religion usually depicted as a canine or a man with a canine head. Okay, over here it says Anubis was also an embalmer by the Middle Kingdom. He was replaced by Osiris in his role as Lord of the Underworld. One of his prominent roles was as a god who ushered souls into the afterlife. And so even though it's using Egyptian mythology here, I believe it's representing what Jesus is going to do. This is just before the resurrection is about to take place, and so Jesus is on his way at this point. And I've also talked about how the dog also represents the bride, and you also see the dog depicted in the beginning of the movie. Okay, I'll just show it to you over here. You can see it before the goat comes out. You see that there's a man with a dog, and I've talked about how the dog represents the bride. It was Joshua and Caleb who scoped out the land during the 40 days in the wilderness, and this is also the year of the dog. And so I made some videos about how the dog represents the bride over here, and so you see that depicted first, and then you see the goat come out, which represents the mark of the beast. Okay, and so I believe that's why the dog Anubis is represented in this imagery, because I believe he represents the bride, as well as Jesus being the Lord of the afterlife and the resurrection, and ushering the souls into the afterlife, which would be heaven, of course. Okay, and I just want to back up a little bit and say that it may appear evil, the fact that he has this all-seeing eye on his forehead, and the imagery looks like a capstone. I'll show it to you a little bit further down, what it looks like. But you can see that it looks like the capstone of the pyramid. And so I just want to say that's not necessarily evil, because Jesus is the true capstone. And I believe this is the year of the capstone, as I've talked about before, the head of the corner. And so he's the true cornerstone. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to this imagery over here, and I sped it up a little bit. But this character over here is called Draco, and so he represents the dragon, he represents Satan. And it's just showing how Satan has control, especially over the young people, I believe, with the media and all the electronics, and constantly, feeding people's brains with, all the news and everything that's going on. And it's just a representation of mind control, of how Satan's controlling people's minds. And then over here you see the pit opening up, and again Jesus is coming at the same time. CERN is doing their thing at the same time. And then this imagery, I'll go ahead and pause it. This, if you look at the characters over here, it says the whirling heart of Islam awakened to the one true God. He is free and needs no control. And so this little boy here, and probably his mother as well, I'm not sure if it doesn't describe the mother, so it just describes the boy, but they've been awakened to the true God, to Christ. And so I believe that's why she has a halo on her head. This also could be a type and shadow of the resurrection when Jesus died, because my first thought was that this looked like the Virgin Mary with Jesus, and Jesus was wrapped with strips of cloth when he was placed in the tomb, which I believe represents the white linen. I've talked about that in some of my earliest videos, that was a type and shadow of being sealed in the rock, and the strips of cloth were a type and shadow of the white linen that was going to be distributed to the saints. And so this is like a type of and shadow of Christ, and these people have been converted to Christ, and so this boy is about to be resurrected, And this represents probably the myrrh and oil that was used when Jesus was placed in the tomb, is what I'm thinking. But then you also see this imagery here in the sky, which could be the heavens being opened, the windows of heaven being opened, or it could be a nuclear explosion. But I believe this represents the oil and myrrh, and this is a type of when Jesus was the first fruits of the resurrection, so it's a type of that. But these are converted from Islam to Christianity, so they've been converted, and then you see the resurrection take place a little bit later. Okay, I'll go ahead and put it back to normal speed. And again, the cockroaches could be an indication that there's been a nuclear explosion. And then I believe this is the bond of Satan being released, or the bond of, I'll just slow it down, but I believe you can see the skull and bones. And so I believe this represents the satanic influences that cause these children to fight in these wars. And so this bond is being released because Jesus is on his way, and that's why his eyes look like he's possessed. They're red, but then the red goes away as soon as he releases that bond. And then, okay, put it back to normal speed. But I think this imagery just shows how he's drowning, and this is like Jesus comes right at the last minute, and she's about to be run over by these tanks. And I believe this is like the Grim Reaper just letting her know that her time is up. Because if you go back, I'll just go a little bit further back, you see that she's has the white flag, so she's trying to surrender. Over here it says opposing courageously those who would enslave her. And so she's for peace, and she's trying to prevent this war from happening. Okay, if you go back a little bit, you also see this yin-yang symbol. So I believe this represents the two different DNAs, the two forces that are out there, good and evil. So at first I thought that maybe she represented evil at some point, because I didn't really understand all the imagery. But I realize now that the imagery that's on her face is not necessarily evil. I'll just try to get to it. Okay, at one point I had misinterpreted this imagery over here, but I realize now that that's the radiation symbol, and she's saying no to radiation, which of course that would be a result of the nuclear war, and so she's for peace. And so I think this is like the Grim Reaper just letting her know that her time is up, that they're not going to surrender, and she's just at peace with it, because once she realizes it, you see that the way she reacts, it's like she understands and she's at peace with it. And so, and then again, you have Jesus on his way, and I'll speed it up a little bit again. I'll just go to normal speed. Okay, so Jesus is still on his way, and then Satan is still trying to attack this little boy with the media, and then Jesus finally breaks through the veil. Okay, so I'll just play that again slowly, but this was a type and shadow. The veil being rent in twain was a type and shadow of the veil being rent when Jesus comes back through the heavens. And so I'm running out of time, and so I'll have to continue with this imagery, and I'll explain why this is a mouth and why he's in flames in the next video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.